I trusted you, and now you're stealing from us! Hello everybody, welcome back to another episode of Business Blaze, brought to you by Backblaze. A match made in heaven, and not just because of the name, but because Backblaze is awesome and you should get it. It's like $6 a month, you get unlimited backup for your computer. I'm not even on the ad read. Oh, you get 15 days for free, just to kind of try it out, which you should probably do. I'll tell you a bit more about them later. Let's get into it. Today we're doing rivalries, Steve Jobs versus Bill Gates. Bill Gates ultimately won, I guess. I mean, everyone ultimately loses when they ultimately die, but Steve Jobs is dead. Bill Gates, the victor. I don't know if that's appropriate, probably not.
Hey, death is the easy way out. So I say do it. Do it! Do it, do it, do it.
Steve Jobs died young of cancer, it was sad.
Gonna cry?
Oh, let's just get into it, shall we? If you're new here, what happens is Danny writes a script, I shall read the script, and then Sam afterwards will add some memes. Is my head getting cut off? I'm just gonna... Nope, that's down. Sam said to me the other day, is that Simon, the background's too dark. And I was like, okay, so I bought this lamp. Obviously, I could have fixed the neon sign, but I didn't. The fragile course of human history is littered with bitter rivalries that become the stuff of legend. Simon and Danny, Thomas Edison and Nikola Tesla, Bjorn Borg and John McEnroe. Oh, who cares? The Beatles and the Rolling Stones, Ronald McDonald and the Burger King, Yogi Bear and Ranger Smith. I don't know, I mean, I've heard of Yogi Bear. I don't think I've ever seen it. I don't know who Ranger Smith is. Is that like Yogi Bear's nemesis? What a thrill. However, very few competitive feuds were destined to help shape the future in quite the same way as the fierce rivalry between Apple's Steve Jobs and Microsoft's Bill Gates. But considering the apparent volatility of the complex relationship, it can be quite challenging to figure out if they were sworn enemies, good buddies, suspicious allies, respectful competitors, argumentative drama queens, oh my god, this goes on, mutual savers, illicit lovers. I don't think they were that, Danny. Allegedly.
A man can dream, though.
Or a peculiar, ever-fluctuating combination of all of the above. I thought, I didn't realize that, I mean, of course they were like business rivals, but there is that interview where they're both being interviewed at the same time. All I remember is they're sitting in like red leather chairs, which look really weird, and they seem to get along quite well. So how exactly did the hippie and the nerd manage to end up running the two biggest tech companies in history while simultaneously patting each other on the back and lobbing digital grenades in each other's faces? Well, we know how Bill Gates got there, because he's a nerd and he's wicked smart and super motivated and all of that stuff. And now everyone on the internet just hates him, despite the fact that he wants to save the world. And I mentioned this in a previous video, I was like, why does everyone hate Bill Gates? He's literally spending all his money to save lives. And people were like, oh, he's been up to some shady shit. Forget about the microchips he's injecting. Oh my god, you're so banned right now. Banned. Smash the dislike button, you wacko. Back in the 1970s, long before computers made it into the everyday household, the US giant IBM dominated a market of giant supercomputers, which you'd only ever get to see in the offices of particularly flashy businesses. They were usually cumbersome beasts that took up half a room, weighed half a ton, cost the equivalent of about $500,000 today, and if you were really clever, you could get them to print out half a spreadsheet. It is amazing, and I do love the fact, like, even today's supercomputers, it'd be like, yeah, in like 50 years, like our magical like iPhone 17. No, 50 years. iPhone 60. It'll be doing it. Like, no worries. It'll be doing it better. When Steve Jobs and Bill Gates both independently arrived on the scene to launch their own separate businesses in the mid-1970s, they were embarking on a journey that would spearhead a new microcomputer revolution. None of this is news. But they were approaching it from two very different angles. Bill Gates was born and raised in West Philadelphia. No, he wasn't. He was born in Seattle in 1955. Although he was born into a wealthy family, his dad was a senior lawyer and his mum was a major bank executive, it was ingrained in Bill from a very early age that he should work hard and take nothing for granted. I like that. Because, like, if Bill Gates was just spoiled by his parents and, like, just told, yeah, you'll be fine, don't worry about it, he wouldn't be Bill Gates, would he? He'd just be like a regular dude, trust fund kid or whatever, no one cares. And young Bill did indeed embrace an industrious childhood, although he soon found out that he was becoming far more interested in computer coding than the other boring academic stuff. He would often spend his spare time creating computer programs with his buddy, Paul Allen, and the most controversial thing that I could dig up from Bill's childhood is that he and Paul once received a summer-long ban from the Computer Center Corporation after they were caught exploiting bugs in the operating system to bag themselves more free time on the computers. Oh, the nerds are being naughty! Bill enrolled in Harvard in 1973. Told you he was smart, but he dropped out after just 2 years to found Microsoft with Paul, quickly signing a deal with the mighty IBM to develop a new basic software for IBM machines. I love like the dropping out of Harvard thing, or wherever Mark Zuckerberg went to university. Like loads of these like tech billionaires or whatever dropped out of Harvard or dropped out of whatever Ivy League school that they got accepted into, and everyone's like, you know, maybe dropping out of university is not so bad. It's like, no, it is. These guys are just the rare exception where they were too smart for Harvard, or you know. It's very rare. Generally, don't drop out of university. You're not Bill Gates. You're not Steve Jobs. You're not Mark Zuckerberg.
I'm smart, you're dumb. I'm big, you're little. I'm right, you're wrong.
You're just not, statistically. Don't kid yourself. Don't drop out of university. If you got into Harvard, finish it. And everyone like in the comments below be like, oh, Simon, I don't know. These guys did it. It's like, yeah, they did. When you get older, it's okay. You know, if you're writing that, you're young. You're young. The world will eventually crush your dreams. Don't worry. Also, there are plenty of tech billionaires who did finish university. The formative years of Steve Jobs were a little different. Raised by adoptive parents in Mountain View, California, young Steve showed an early interest in tinkering with machines in his dad's garage, but he found it difficult to concentrate at school and regularly found himself in trouble for his disruptive behavior. Steve appeared to resist figures of authority, and even got himself suspended from school a couple of times. Oh no! He later dropped out of college without bothering to tell his parents and briefly served as a technician for Atari before making a sudden decision to embark on a new radical journey in his life. I've read that Walter Isaacson book, Steve Jobs, I think is the actual title of the book. It's really good. Steve Jobs is a bit of a weird dude. Like, I guess we're gonna get into this. There was a time where he was like a fruitarian, so he'd only eat fruit which had fallen off trees. It's like, dude, what the fuck? He shaved his head and buggered off to India on a quest to find spiritual enlightenment. Alright? Traveling all around the country while completely off his tits on acid. Is that? I don't remember that being in the book. It's not clear whether he found what he was looking for, although he did later claim that his experiments with LSD ranked as one of the 2 or 3 most important things I've ever done in my life. Wow, if Business Blaze was ever a advocate for any drug, you know, other than the obvious one, LSD, one of Steve Jobs' greatest experiences. I've never done it. But I'd give it a try, I guess. After returning to the US to live in a hippie commune for a while, Steve decided to change direction again and went back to work for Atari. Perhaps his most significant assignment at Atari was to lead the team that would create the circuit board for the classic arcade game, Breakout. Is that the one where you're bouncing the ball against the thing and it knocks? I love that game. This was a brilliant next generation version of Pong in which why? Danny's just gonna tell me immediately after I've said everything. Where the player takes control of a horizontally moving pad at the bottom of the screen with the aim of maintaining a bouncing blah blah blah. Yeah, it does exactly what I just said. Boop, boop, boop. Steve was offered a huge bonus by Atari if he could oversee development of a prototype of the game in which with a tiny amount of logic chips within just 4 days. Now Steve wasn't capable of doing this by himself, so he roped in an old school buddy, Steve Wozniak, to slave away on the design of the game for 4 straight nights, while also holding down a day job at Hewlett-Packard. In return, Jobs promised to split the big bonus from Atari with Wozniak. I know everyone knows the story, right? Steve Jobs screws him over pretty hard. Spoiler alert, but look. You clicked on a video about Bill Gates and Steve Jobs. It's not, let's be frank, it's not the most clickable title in the world, so you're probably into this, you're probably interested, so you probably know this story. Let's just, what's going on? Just tell the story, Simon. What's wrong with you? Why are you so at your job? The prototype was completed for the deadline and Breakout went on to become a smash hit, both in the arcades and on the Atari console. Steve Jobs told Wozniak that Atari paid him a bonus of $700 by giving Wozniak, also called Steve, $350 of it. Except what he'd really done was screw his good buddy over, because Atari had actually paid Steve Jobs $5,000. And this is like in what, 1970s, 70s money? That's gotta be like 50 grand today. Wozniak didn't learn of the deception until 10 years later and charitably declared that he'd be more than happy to give his pal some money if he'd known that Jobs was struggling financially. In the meantime, still blissfully unaware that his mate had ripped him off, Wozniak joined forces with Jobs in 1976 to found the Apple Corporate Computer Company. One thing, I mean, like, if you had found out, like, if I was in Wozniak's position and this dude, who I thought was my friend, had screwed me out of so much money, I'd be like, F you, Steve, we're not doing together. And then, you know, he wouldn't be Steve Wozniak and he wouldn't be Steve Jobs. So everyone loses, but f you, Steve, you dick scumbag. I've no respect for the dead.
From out of the darkness, a necromancer.
I love how when someone dies, it's like we have to suddenly respect them more often. And it's like, wait, we can't talk about all the bad he did. It's like, that. Now they're dead, at least they can't sue me. Allegedly. In order to get the new operation up and running, Jobs had sold his Volkswagen bus for a few $100s, and Wozniak had sold his scientific calculator for $500. Dude, you know you're a maximum level nerd when you have a calculator that's worth the equivalent of $5,000. Before the pair got to work on designing the first Apple computer in Jobs' family garage. It wouldn't take long before the paths of Bill Gates and Steve Jobs would cross, although they were clearly two very different people running two very different companies, except they were both computer companies. Bill Gates was a dedicated technical coder running a company focused on producing software for other computer manufacturers. He made no secret of the fact that his driving ambition was to try and become absolutely stinking filthy rich. I love it. He's just like, it. Yeah, why not? I'll embrace it. It's like, I'm kind of like, yeah, no, I like money. I mean, I'm never going to be Bill Gates rich, but it's like, I'm like, yeah, no. I mean, I do sponsors because I like money. There's loads of AdSense on my videos because I like money. I don't have a problem with that at all.
Capital is big.
In contrast, while Steve Jobs knew his way around a computer better than most, he was certainly no technical coder, and he didn't seem bothered about making too much money, which is a shame for the poor lamb because he ended up becoming one of the wealthiest men that ever lived. It's like, whoops. Well, although it is like more like, oh no, I didn't even try to make money. I was like, I just wanted to make some stuff, and I just happened to become mad rich. It's almost cooler. It is cooler. It is cooler. Steve was more of a persuasive marketer and a motivational team leader than a technical man, and his goal was to oversee the development of cool new machines that would change the world. The Apple II was one such machine. I guess the Apple I wasn't. Launched in 1977 as one of the world's first mass-produced microcomputers for ordinary Joe rather than corporate company corporations. OG business plays legend joke right there. The Apple II, it was destined for somewhere when I can eventually turn this page. Massive success. Oh, I'd be like, it was destined for consumers. Nope. Massive success. Good news for you, Steve. Plural. And wider claim, but it did come with a teething problem. Steve's new hardware was in need of some of Bill's new software. Okay, that's not a problem. That seems like a match made in heaven. There's no animosity between them, is there? Steve was looking for somebody to furnish the Apple II with a spreadsheet program, a word processor program, and a simple-to-use programming language. No big deal. And Microsoft was the obvious choice to provide Apple with Excel, Word, and BASIC. I love that these things haven't changed the name over, what, like decades. It's still called Excel. It's still called Word. Although these days, I mean, do people really use these anymore? I used to think the idea of having a computer without Microsoft Word was absurd. And I was like, well, why would I have Microsoft Word? I just use Google Drive, obviously.
Capital is big.
Steve flew over to Seattle with an Apple II machine tucked away inside his hand luggage, which he intended to show off to Bill at the Microsoft offices. Bill wasn't initially that impressed with the machine, which he felt was quite limited in its capabilities. But he was even less impressed with Steve Jobs. Yeah, it's like Bill's this corporation dude. He's probably wearing a tie. He's probably all like, extremely wealthy. And Steve is like, Bill, have you tried this pear? It fell off a tree. It's like, off, Steve, you weirdo. Like, what the bro?
Hippies. They're everywhere. They want to save the earth, but all they do is smoke pot and smell bad.
It's worth bearing in mind that Apple was still a tiny and relatively unknown company at this point, whereas Microsoft was already in bed with IBM and had forged several lucrative deals to produce pioneering software for pioneering new machines. Yes, this is interesting. Just there's another, I recently read, it was 5 years ago, I read a biography about Larry Ellison. He's the guy who runs Oracle, who I think are now in a bid to take over TikTok or something like that in the US. This biography was like fascinating, and Larry Ellison is a intense guy. Like, his primary motivating factor, seemingly through a large portion of his life, was just to be richer than Bill Gates. And he's slowly getting there. He's just like, yeah, no, I just want to be richer than Bill. It's like, that is a fucked up motivation. Allegedly. What are we talking about? It's a good biography though. It's not an autobiography, it's about him. So it's candid and intense. Yet Bill found Steve to be surprisingly arrogant, as if the Apple boss was doing Bill a favor by just letting him have a look at the machine. That would piss me off. I imagine it's gonna piss Bill Gates off as well. In Bill's own words, it was kind of a weird seduction visit where Steve was saying, we really don't need you, and we're doing this great thing, and it's under the cover. He's in Steve Jobs sales mode, but kind of sales mode that also says, I don't need you, but I might let you be involved. Despite the apparent clash of personalities, Bill and Microsoft had eventually agreed to produce new software for Apple, signaling the beginning of a beautiful relationship between the future tech giants. Daddy writes, well, a relationship anyway. I'm guessing it wasn't so beautiful, which is why this video is called Rivalries, Bill Gates and Steve Jobs. For the next few years, Microsoft would work very closely with Apple on developing software for the Apple II, and its eventual success in the Macintosh playing a huge role in both machines getting off the ground. At one point, Bill quipped that he had more people working on his new Mac than Steve Jobs did. That's brilliant. But it was at times an uneasy partnership, and this was largely because Steve Jobs was becoming increasingly worried about Bill Gates' continued relationship with IBM. Before the release of the Macintosh in 1984, user interfaces had always been dry, boring, text-based affairs, which appeared completely impenetrable to the novice user. Steve knew that the key to getting more computers into homes was to come up with a more intuitive, graphical user interface, which featured visual representations of applications and documents and trash cans and things. Oh, it's all sounding so familiar. The new Macintosh, with its quite swishy graphical capabilities, would take the first groundbreaking step towards this dream of creating a beautiful new operating system for the future that even your weird Uncle Derek might be able to get his head around. I was thinking, like, the start bar is still a thing. It's like, since being a kid, the start bar has been a thing. The clock is on the right, the start button is on the left. It's just always been like this. And it's amazing that I've never known anything else. I think one year, Microsoft tried to get rid of it and everyone was like, what the f***, where's the start menu? How are we supposed to use this? And then they brought it back. It did actually happen. I vaguely remember having a computer without a start menu. And I had to download like an external plugin, like, you know, a program that emulated a start menu because there wasn't one. I was like, what the fuck is this? But Steve feared that Bill's Microsoft engineers were secretly copying Macintosh technology so that Bill could use it for his own ends and flog something new to IBM. By 1983, the shit had hit the heatsink. When Steve Jobs felt that his worst suspicions had been confirmed. And before we get into those worst suspicions, your worst suspicion might be like, has my hard disk failed? Well, look, with Backblaze, you don't have to worry about that. You know what? You know why? Because Backblaze is a backup solution. They take your hard disk, like I've got many hard disks, many hard disks. Backblaze have told me, don't tell them how much data you back up, Simon. You're an edge case. Most people are not doing that much. But look, it's unlimited. Why not? I make a lot of video content and I needed a backup solution, okay? Backblaze, you got your hard disk right there. It takes a copy of it, encrypted, so it's nice and safe, you know? I don't know what you're keeping on your computer, John. And it uploads it to the cloud, encrypted, so that then, if your hard disk fails, you can be like, oh, Backblaze, it's happened! I've lost all my data! And they'll be like,
Daddy, chill.
Don't worry, I don't even know why I have the notes. And they'll be like, don't worry, Simon, we're gonna send you out a hard disk. And you'll be like, but Backblaze have a really fast internet connection. They're like, oh, fine, whatever, just download all your data. No problem. You could download all those terabytes. Have fun with that. And I would, because my internet's fast. But if you don't have fast internet, they'll just ship you out a hard disk. And how it works is then you can keep the hard disk and pay them for it, or you can return it and they'll give you the money back for the hard disk. Also, you'll be thinking right now, Simon, I bet this is mad expensive. I bet it's like, I don't know, this is probably something for rich people. Well, let me tell you, it is not. It is $6 a month. I don't know how much that is a year. I think it's actually $60 a year because they do a discount thing. Let me just check that. I don't want to be like false advertising by accident. Backblaze would be upset, I would get in trouble. And I pay for this per year. But look, it's so little money that I don't really even notice. Tell me the price.
Capital is big.
$60 a year. If you want it for 2 years, it's even less. Why didn't I do that? Why didn't I do that? $110 for 2 years. $6 a month, $60 a year, or $110 for 2 years. It's absurdly cheap, and it's ridiculously good, and it's everything you need. Let me just make sure that I've actually said everything that I'm supposed to say. Oh yeah, you get a free trial. 15-day free trial, there is a link below. I've used Backblaze for years. The reason I feel like I can go off script so much is because I am a happy customer long before they started paying me to say that I was a happy customer. So just get Backblaze, it's the best. Link below, support the show. A year... I hope I don't have to redo that. Sorry, Backblaze. A year before the Macintosh hit the market, Microsoft announced that it was working on the very first version of Windows, an intuitive graphical user interface, which would ultimately launch in 1985 and be compatible with all IBM computers. It's no surprise that Steve Jobs hit the glass roof. Is there a joke there? Glass roof? Mac? Glass roof? I know there's a glass ceiling, but Steve Jobs definitely wasn't affected by that. Oh, f it. Just in case. When he found out about Windows, feeling that he'd been deceived, he got straight on the blur to Bill and reportedly yelled, "You're ripping us off! I trusted you! And now you're stealing from us! He would publicly later declare, they just ripped us off completely. Because Gates has no shame. Oh, I love this, it's so dramatic. Bill's response was, if he believes that, he really has entered into one of his own reality distortion fields. That laugh was all my own. We'll put that in square brackets. But here's the thing. In truth, both of them had borrowed the idea from the research institution called Xerox PARC, who had developed quite a cool graphical user interface years earlier. But strangely, they weren't really bothering to do anything with it. Steve Jobs had been the first to take a tour of Xerox PARC Labs and was reportedly blown away with this amazing new product, which was not yet available on the market. The pips from the Macintosh were already very much planted in Apple on that fateful day. But above pips and Apple, get it? I might not get the glass roof one, but I get this. So Steve Jobs basically got angry at Bill because he stole Steve's stolen idea. What the f, Steve? Scumbag? Allegedly. Unbeknownst to Steve, Bill Gates had also been introduced to the work of Xerox a little later and had drawn similar conclusions. There was no denying that graphical user interfaces were destined to become a breakthrough in personal computing. It's still baffling as to why Xerox had gone to the trouble of developing the game-changing technology and then just sat on it for years until somebody else came and stole it. But that's exactly how Bill Gates saw the situation when Steve Jobs accused him of deceit. I'm on Bill's side. Team Bill, smash that dislike button. Bill said, well, Steve, I think there's more than one way of looking at it. I think it's more like we both had this rich neighbor named Xerox, and I broke into his house to steal the TV set and found out that you'd already stolen it. Did he really say that? That's amazing. I really hope he said allegedly afterwards. Apple had briefly argued that the generic look and feel of the Macintosh operating system should be subject to patent protection, despite the fact that they'd nicked it from Xerox. But that would have been a bit silly, a bit like Henry Ford trying to patent the car, or the Wright brothers trying to patent the flying machine, which they totally fucking did. Oh, if you haven't seen our video about the Wright brothers, boy, they were the OG patent trolls. That video is worth a watch. I don't think they got as many views as usual. I don't know why. I love that video. Bill knew that Apple couldn't seriously claim exclusive rights to a whole concept. Oh, Bill. Oh, Bill. Oh, Steve. Whoever the Wright brothers' lawyers were, you need to find their descendants. You need to hire that law firm. To the end, I'm just going to roam a little. My legs are getting tired. This naturally led to the end of the original collaboration between Microsoft and Apple. I really thought it would have ended when he f***ing yelled down the phone at him that you're a thieving Bill. Allegedly. Over the next couple of decades or so, Bill Gates and Microsoft went from strength to strength. The original version of Windows had actually proven to be a bit of a flop, but subsequent tweaked versions ironed out the early cracks, and Windows 95 will be installed on pretty much every PC on the market, helping the PC to knock the Mac off its pedestal, whilst making Bill Gates the richest man in the world. Yeah, he was the first centie billionaire, right? He made $100 billion. That was like in the 90s. Amazing. Things weren't quite so peachy over at Apple. Although initial sales of the Macintosh had been promising, sales had started to plummet by 1985 and the company was losing ground to IBM, leading to a power struggle within the very core of Apple. Get it? Core of Apple.
Okay, Boomer.
Steve Jobs had been considered far too young and experienced to take on the role of CEO of Apple after the company first went public. So Steve had offered the role to then president of PepsiCo, John Scully, with the immortal words, "Do you want to sell sugar water for the rest of your life, or come with me and change the world?" Oh, Steve, I mean, I like Apple, but you just make computers. Bill Gates is changing the world with, giving away billions of dollars. Despite the... I don't even want to talk about the Bill Gates conspiracies anymore, it makes me sad. But the decision would come back to bite him. By 1985, Steve was the general manager of the Macintosh division, but he was becoming increasingly alienated from the company that he founded. It's alleged that Steve was creating an environment of animosity and blind fear while devoting his time to projects that the rest of the company knew were doomed to fail. John Scully removed Steve from his position in the Macintosh division, leading to a scrappy fight to seize control of the whole company. And during one historic board meeting, Scully asked the board of directors,
"Nobody will stop me from being the one that'll throw the switch and gas you out of this life for good, you son of a..."
to choose between himself and Steve Jobs. The board unanimously elected to go with Scully. Oh, that's gotta burn. It's like, but guys, I made this company. Get the f*** out, Steve. Dick. Left without a significant role, Steve Jobs parted ways with Apple. We've talked about the pros and cons of taking a company public in the past. Like pro, you get mad rich. Con, it's not really your company anymore. He took a few faithful employees with him to form a new hardware and software company called Next, which turned out to be a bit of a damp squib, and ironically was swallowed up by Apple a few years later. Yeah, they made a really expensive computer. I've seen one of them in a museum. It's a good-looking computer. I mean, for the 1970s, of course, it looks like nothing. I mean, it's like wizard technology compared to what they had back then. But I mean, and it's obviously more powerful, and it's like just a screen. It's amazing. The future is the best. The future is going to be even better.
Future's now, old man.
But it wasn't all bad news for Steve. He also purchased a small animation company from George Lucas for $5 million, which eventually came to be known as Pixar. You might have heard of that one. Jumping lamps and all that shit. It's reported that Steve briefly considered selling the studio to his old rival, Microsoft, in 1995, but he was probably glad that he changed his mind. 1 year later, Pixar released Toy Story, and then went to make Steve Jobs billionaire overnight when he took the company public. During this period, Bill and Steve had continued to trade occasional barbs with each other, although to be fair, most of them seemed to come from Steve. When he appeared on the PBS documentary Triumph of the Nerds in 1996, Steve appeared to be in a particularly grumpy mood. He declared, "The only problem with Microsoft is that they have no taste." Oh, they have absolutely no taste. And I don't mean that in a small way. I mean that in a big way. Steve, when does it stop? This is not appropriate. In the sense that they don't think of original ideas, and Steve, you stole the graphical user interface idea from Xerox. I thought they just made photocopiers. They don't bring much original culture into their products. I have no problem with their success. Sounds like you do though, doesn't it? I have a problem with the fact that they just make really third-rate products. Their products have no spirit in them. Who cares? After the documentary first aired, Steve revealed to the New York Times that he called Bill on the phone to apologize for his choice of words. But it was a bit of a half-assed apology at best. If you're going to apologize, don't do it half-assed. Either mean it or don't. Come on. Come on! He explained in the paper, "I told him I believed every word of what I'd said, but that I never should have said it in public." That is not an apology, dude. I wish him the best, I really do. I just think he and Microsoft are a bit narrow. He'd be a broader guy if he'd dropped acid once or twice, or gone off on an ashram when he was younger. Steve, not everyone wants to be like you. Like, really, they don't. I don't think most people want to be like you, Steve. It's like, most people don't want to get on acid and go to a fucking ashram. By 1997, Apple was on the verge of bankruptcy, and in a fit of desperation, he turned back to their original co-founder for guidance. Then CEO Gil Amelio acquired the floundering Next company, which effectively brought Steve back into the Apple fold, although Bill Gates had personally advised Gil Amelio against doing this. Not surprising, Bill's probably not feeling so awesome about Steve right now, is he? Bill told him, "Don't you understand that Steve doesn't know anything about technology? He's just a super salesman. I can't believe you're making such a stupid decision." Gil Amelio may have regretted not listening to wise old Bill. I do feel it's good guy Bill, most of the time. Good guy Bill. Within just 5 months, Steve had ousted Amelio in a boardroom coup and finally became CEO of the company that he founded 20 years earlier. Oh, he got them back, didn't he? But still, he had a mountain to climb in getting Apple back onto the right tracks as the company hurtled ever closer to bankruptcy. So he phoned up an old mate and asked him if he might be willing to lend a hand. It's Bill Gates. I know it's Bill Gates. And this is why Microsoft own a bit of Apple today. That old buddy was, of course, Bill Gates. Mwah!
How innovative! I like it!
God, I love it! This is so good. This is something we briefly covered in an old Business Place episode, that's probably why I know it. And it's also common knowledge. Famous companies that came back from the dead. Bill Gates agreed on the phone call to pump $150 million into Apple and effectively save his old rival from oblivion. The deal was rather awkwardly announced by Steve Jobs on stage at the Macworld Boston conference. I've seen this. It's on YouTube. You can watch it. It's kind of worth it. He gets some pretty heavy booze. During which he introduced the new savior of Apple via a live stream satellite link. As the giant face of Bill Gates appeared on the massive screen and talked with enthusiasm about the exciting opportunities ahead for both companies, it was met with hostile booing from the very audience he was pretty much single-handedly rescuing from the void.
And if we could get him up on the stage right now.
Surprise, motherfucker.
If I was Bill, I'd be like, all right, fuck you. And Steve was like, we got a contract. Bill's like, I got more money than you. Take me to court. But Bill wouldn't do that because he's a good guy. But both Steve and Bill later regretted how the announcement was handled. Hindsight's 20/20 though, boys. Steve said, "That was my worst and stupidest staging event ever. It was bad because it made me look small, and as if everything was in Bill's hands." Bill was equally embarrassed about the whole thing, saying later, "I didn't know that my face was going to be blown up to looming proportions." Yeah, he was. He's just massive on the back of the stage. There are differing theories as to why exactly Bill Gates decided to come to the rescue of his old adversary, but it probably all boils down to the fact that Bill was a good businessman. He knew that Microsoft was still making money by flogging software to Mac users, and he knew that Microsoft would ultimately benefit if Apple continued to innovate instead of being abandoned and left to die. The Microsoft deal spanned 5 years and saw a new uneasy truce between the two companies, during which time public insults were kept to a bare minimum. Probably smart. Although some hardcore Apple enthusiasts viewed this period as a dark patch in the history of the company, I don't understand. Like, I like Apple. I have mostly Apple products. I also have some Windows products as well.
Capital is pig.
But who cares? Anyone who is this like loyal or invested in a brand, I'm like, bro, there's some hobbies or some shit like that. Although some hardcore Apple enthusiasts view this period as a dark patch in the history of the company, which had seen Apple surrender to the enemy, it was really a springboard for the future triumphant success of Apple, allowing them to turn their attention to the smaller screen and develop ultra cool products such as the iPod, the iPad, and the iPhone. Yeah, all of those are pretty cool, I have to say. Good decision. Bill didn't seem terribly impressed with the iPad, although he'd been quite taken with the earlier launch of the iTunes service, prompting him to send an internal email to Microsoft staff which read, "Steve Jobs' ability to focus in on a few things that count, get people who get user interface right, and market things as revolutionary are amazing things." That is a really awkward sentence, Bill, but I guess, okay. Also, he likes the one thing that sucks. Like, I didn't get Apple products for so long because the one thing I had, iTunes on Windows, was such a steaming pile of shit that I was like, why does everyone love Apple? The one piece of software I use from them is just so bad. And then I got Apple and I was like, oh, iTunes works really well on a Mac. It's just shit PC. Oh, why? The gloves seemed to have come off again following the end of the Microsoft deal, although again, most of the jibes seemed to come from Apple's side. The famous Get a Mac TV marketing campaign from 2006 depicted a laid-back, casual and easygoing bloke introducing himself with "I'm a Mac." I remember this, whilst a stiff, boring form man in a suit replied with "I'm a PC." And it'd be like, yeah, at the time, like, I don't know. I'd be like, I don't want to be like the hip guy. I just got work to do. Like, I don't let my computer define me. I guess it worked though. But there were occasional kind words thrown into the mix too. When Steve and Bill appeared on stage together at the 2007 All Things Digital conference, Bill admitted, "This might have been the thing with the red chairs. I'd give a lot to have Steve's taste. The way he does things is just different, and, you know, I think it's magical. And in this case, wow." Steve responded with a slightly more cautious, "Bill was the first to truly see the value of software." But it's interesting how both Steve and Bill changed so much over the course of the previous 30 years. Steve had not originally been chasing the dream of getting rich, but he now clearly cared about profit and loss and had matured into an excellent businessman. Yeah, because when he gets money, he's like, oh, so, you know, if he's just a hippie bumming around India doing his ashram or whatever, he's like, I don't need money, I'm great. And then he gets some money, he's like, you know what's really nice? Money. I could get more of that.
Hello, I like money.
Meanwhile, Bill became the richest man on earth, but then decided to phase out his work at Microsoft and devote his time and wealth to philanthropic endeavors such as the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and putting chips in everyone's butt. What, Danny? No, I just made that. Danny didn't say that because Danny's not insane. Steve seemed to approve of Bill's change in focus. He said, "I think the world's a better place because Bill realized that his goal isn't to be the richest guy in the cemetery. Bill is basically unimaginative and has never invented anything, which is why I think he's more comfortable in philanthropy than technology." Wow! Backhanded compliment there. Following a long battle with pancreatic cancer, Steve Jobs died in May 2011. Bill had paid one last visit to dying Steve to say goodbye to his old adversary, ally, rival, and very possibly slightly prickly friends. Although, as you said at the beginning, Danny, maybe they were lovers. They weren't. And of course, nobody lost in the rivalry between the hippie and the nerd. Instead, the competitive nature of the two men helped to shape the modern computer world, drive forward new technology, and totally transform the way that we live our lives today. And along the way, they gave us Microsoft Bob and the Apple Newton too. OG Business Blaze legend jokes right there. Paying tribute to Steve Jobs, Bill revealed, "I respect Steve. We spurred each other on, even as competitors. None of what he said bothers me at all. There was no peace to make. We were not at war. We made great products, and competition was always a positive thing." I like it. Bill, you're a legend. Smash that dislike button, crazies. Yes, I can't help but feel that Bill Gates generally comes out as a better man in the 30-year squabble. Although petty insults were traded on both sides, they usually came from Steve, whereas Bill was more often likely to heap gushing praise on his rival than slag him off. Bill Gates was probably the better businessman, the more talented and dedicated boffin, and now the man most likely to help save the world. Steve was undoubtedly the better salesman and team leader, and credit where credit's due. If you had to choose between which of the two you'd have liked to hook up with for a psychedelic acid trip inside the mind palace of strawberry trees and mushroom clouds and disco dancing unicorns, Steve Jobs would have been your man every single time. Yeah, he would have, if that's what you're into. This video has been brought to you by Backblaze. Please do check it out, link below. Also, if you would like to purchase the merch, this is one of my favorite t-shirts we've made so far, and it's a bit niche. It's probably just for people who really like this show, but it is the Blaze logo, made like the Enron logo, allegedly. It's available in the merch store. Check it out below. There's also loads of other shit in there as well. And thank you for watching.
Hey, Dolph, take a memo on your Newton. Beat up Martin. Bah!
The world will eventually crush your dreams. Don't worry.